because I will normally start talking really loud. I'm very excited. This might be a surprise. I believe in Agile. I say that in part because I tend to speak to most organizations and most venues where people don't believe. So I will probably state some things that you take for granted, and probably state some things as well that will challenge your current thinking about Agile. I'm assuming that many of the people in here actually do Agile, but I raise a hand so I have some sense. How many people are here learning about it for the first time? All right. So let's start with the key things about the caveats about this presentation. I'm going to describe a bunch of things that work for us. It is unlikely that they'll work for you. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. My goal is not to get you to behave exactly like us. I am not an HR expert. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Menlo, also the Chief Architect. I have an MBA. We have legal counsel. They've looked at the stuff we do. But again, I'm not here to give free law advice. I can't tell you what will work in your situation. I can describe what we do and how these HR policies were accidentally born out of the fact that we use Agile practices. Right? Most of the things we do were not because we wanted to have a cool HR policy. It just kind of happened. So there's a whole bunch of different topics. My goal is to try and fly through them and give you all sorts of things to ask questions about. However, you should feel free to try and interrupt me and ask questions along the way, which I might park at the side, but I certainly won't bite or do anything nasty if you try to say, hey, wait, that doesn't make sense. Right? So these are some of the things you should hear about as we go through the material. It helps for you to understand my context. In 1999, I was hired as a consultant to a small company in Ann Arbor called Interface Systems. Interface Systems built printers for mainframes and sold them to the likes of IBM. What they sold was a very small printer, so you could put one in every Kmart where you couldn't actually afford to have a mainframe. So you could actually print stuff everywhere. Along came this whole internet thing. Their product now became a commodity and they didn't have value there anymore. And so they started a new idea, which was to take a computer, have it claim to be a printer, since they were experts on being a printer, and when the print stream came to the printer, convert it to PDF, because everybody now wanted to take your cell phone bill and put it online, right? The problem is most COBOL programmers on a mainframe do not know how to produce PDF. And the time it would take to rewrite all that COBOL code somewhere else to produce PDF is astronomical because you have all the old contracts you still have to service. Okay? So they wanted to transform their organization from a software team that supported a hardware team and had turnaround cycles in 18 months to instead be able to chase this industry that every time the salesman went to a trade show, the rules changed. Right? I mean, every single time, oh, well, here's what people think it's going to be. Oh, well, here's what they're going to do. And what they chose to do was to invest in object technology. This is a new, fascinating thing that came out long before 1999, but they've suddenly decided we're going to revolutionize our organization by adopting objects. We're going to move from C to C++ or Java. So they hired a consulting firm. At the time I was with Commerce One, when I was with AppNet, came in with a team of 3 developers. We engaged with their team, and after getting to know them for about a month, I went back to the VP of product development and told him, bad news, it's not going to work. If we teach your team objects, they're going to do the same thing that they've always done in just new syntax. You're going to get no difference in output. Now, this is a bad thing because I'm a consultant. If I go back to my boss and say, hey, good news, I told the client the $1 million deal isn't worth it, and they fired us, that's not going to look good for me. It's also not going to look good for the VP who got this deal pushed through, signed a $1 million consulting arrangement, and all of a sudden he says, never mind. Right? So Rich looks at me and says, what can we do to succeed? And so we talked about all the things that were going on. At the time, AppNet had purchased several other companies, and I actually started a very small firm that was loosely related to some of the folks working at the C3 project. So we knew about extreme programming. We started talking about all the different behavioral aspects that might actually result in faster turnaround in code. And so we decided to do a 1-week experiment and see if we could make it work. So we said, let's take all the programmers out of their offices. Nice oak doors, windows that looked out at the woods. They've been in these offices for 20 years. Some of them clearly look like it. And we moved them to the factory space that was no longer needed. We took folding tables. We moved out to literally a factory space, took away the assembly line. IT then asked, can we help? Can we put out some network? Now, I'm sophisticated enough to have gotten enough experience along the way that when somebody offers to help, what they're really doing is offering to extend your timeline. No, we don't need it. So our first network was floppy disks. Because we wanted to get to the value first, not through let's build out some perfect experiment. We moved the team out. Rich's 12 developers and my 3. We worked in a language they didn't know, Java. We started pair programming. We didn't use index cards, we used sticky notes for story cards. We stuck them up to the wall. We put food out in the middle. We did all the things that we knew the C3 team was doing. Or at least the good things they described that they were doing, which later we found out wasn't always exactly true. But sometimes the story is better than reality, and so we acted on it. When we moved out here, we attempted to rebuild 20 years worth of technology in 1 week. At the end of 1 week, we assessed where we were. We demoed it, we talked about it, and guess what? We failed. Now, many of the engineers were like, see, I told you it wouldn't work. Now, the VP of Product Development then pointed out, so during this week, did we get more done than you thought we would? The answer was yes, almost across the board. Were you amazed at modules that were built by these people that hadn't yet been tested with modules over here, that when we plugged them up for show and tell, they all worked? Yeah, that was kind of weird. Isn't there supposed to be bugs? Right? Were you surprised when you actually paired with somebody who you've been working with for 20 years that they knew things that you didn't know about? Well, yeah, I never asked them about their prior jobs or know anything about their other skills, or that they had a family, right? And it went all the way through this long list of all these things, and the answer was yes, yes, yes. And so Rich said, excellent. Everybody go back to your office, wrap up everything on your plate in the next 3 days, and we're going to extend the experiment by 6 months. 2 people said, woohoo! 2 people said, hell no, 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 I won't go. And everybody else was like, huh, interesting. Not realizing that they had just helped make the decision. Rich took the risk upon himself, but they helped decide by going through the criteria of, look, we're producing value. The 2 gentlemen who said no, 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 stayed back and they lived in their nice little offices and they continued to do maintenance. All new development was now done out here. Now, long about 1999, there was this little rumbling off in the distance, and beginning of 2000, anybody remember what happened in the IT industry?
Yes.
Kaboom!
That's right.
So, right before Kaboom, we were discovered by 2 California companies. AppNet, where I was working, was bought by Commerce One. In the same month, that Interface Systems was bought by Tumbleweed. At this point, we have IBM coming through and taking a tour, Microsoft coming through and taking a tour and saying, this is so cool, this is really neat. We could never do this. We're thinking, this is really cool, this is fascinating, this is great. We should be on the cover of magazines telling our story. Well, then the bubble burst, and the California CFOs thought, I know how to save money. We'll lay off all those programmers in Michigan, because Michigan is somehow expensive compared to California. I never really understood what they're thinking, but anyhow. And then the really cool thing happened. We're now unemployed. And then we get on the cover of a magazine. This is my business partner, Rich Sheridan. Because after we were unemployed, we decided, hey, we understand cold fusion. This XP thing really actually works. We should start a company that does that. So we started a small firm that does it. Now, everybody who sees this cover goes, wow, how'd you do that? They don't actually read the article because it talks about, hey, you're over 50, you'll never get another job. Start your own company. Right? So we started our own company. The other fascinating thing is it talks about, hey, we've got a $3 million company. Now, of course, nobody actually compared revenue to expenses. Sometimes the business magazines aren't as bright as you'd think. So we moved out of all the organizations that we had into, well, this isn't actually Rich's garage, and we weren't allowed to work in the garage because they had cars there, and Carol didn't like us working at the kitchen table, so that lasted about an hour, and we moved into the basement. So we have 4 business partners, no clients, no employees, no idea what in the world we're going to do. And what's mission number 1? Well, that's right. Well, Rich's wife knows that we have started a company, and she can clearly see through this thin veil. My wife saw me get up and go to work today. That means at the end of the week, she's expecting something else to come back. So, the first basic needs are our employees need to get a paycheck. Of course, it's the 4 of us. And we need a retirement plan, and a health plan, and a flex spending plan. So we go out and find the organizations to come in and help us set this up. Of course, we have no revenue, so the funding mechanism for this is somewhat painful. You end up taking money out of your wallet, putting it in a company so that you can pay yourself, which causes you to pay taxes. A very exciting concept. You get to extend this model. We went out and we sold a deal. $1 million project with Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. Now we actually need people who do work. Right? I mean, we've got 4 executives that used to do work. We started a company. We're not going to do work again. I don't know how to do that. So let's go get some employees. And we start getting ready to hire them in. And then Pfizer pulls the contract. Now all of a sudden, a problem appears. What if I hired those people and had to keep paying their salary? That would be bad if there was no revenue coming in. So we quickly adapted the idea of maybe we ought to have a mix of both employees and contractors, so that as work shows up, we can add more people. And as work goes away, we can have fewer people. And of course, the first 4 employees were the ones that would stay employees, and the first 4 contractors would be the next 4 people. And then from there, we would kind of grow both sides. So this is our first facility once we moved out of the basement. It should look somewhat familiar to those who are practicing Agile. Teams working all together, lots of visible stuff on the board as to what they're supposed to build. There's story cards that you can't quite see on the other side. There's a whiteboard there, right? But a fairly small team. So now we're going to slowly increment our way up and try and build the organization. Now, we want to be a cool company, so of course you need a company dog, right? Now, actually we didn't go out and get a company dog. This is kind of an accident. Somewhat of a sad story. This is Elaine. She works with she's a controller, and her husband passed away. Her children decided to get her a puppy. It makes me wonder what her husband actually used to fulfill in her life, but the puppy now has this problem because she lives 60 miles from the office. And the poor little puppy can't cross his legs long enough and pant all day long. So she decides she wants to bring him to the office. Okay, new HR policy has to be created. We now allow dogs at the office. Now, it turns out once you have one dog at the office, other people get down on the action and say, hey, I want to be able to bring my dog. And now you need to extend the policy. Now, by accident, we kind of built a policy that looks a lot like Google's. If your dog barks, can't be at the office. Dog fights with other dogs, can't be at the office. Dog fights with humans, can't be at the office. And if your dog makes a mess, you have to clean it up. And if any of these things require your time away from work, you're taking paid time off. Because it's not really work, right? So if your dog can actually coexist in this environment, that's fine. And if your dog can't, then it's not an appropriate dog to bring to work. Clients now bring their dogs to visit us. It's really weird. Now, it's also really possible that while some client could yell at us while their dog's there, most of them seem to be very friendly when they bring their animals to visit us for a meeting. We like this. When we think of moving forward with HR policies, we don't actually think of the dog. That just tends to be what people, oh yeah, cool. We actually think of very simple systems that exist inside of Agile. So this is our work board, our work authorization board. What it is all the pairs are across the top. There's 1 week, because we do 1 week iterations, and a bunch of story cards. They're laid out where we predict that they will be completed. So this is an 8-hour story card. This is a 32-hour story card. And this team's going to work on it probably all week. They might get it done early, they might get it done late. They put a yellow sticky dot on it when they're started. They put a green sticky dot on it when it's finished. The fun thing here, the empowering thing for an employee is they know what they're supposed to be working on. I'm an owner of the business. If I come tell one of the people, you should be working on this, you know what they're going to ask me? Where's my story card, and are you going to stick it up in the lane ahead of the other one? so that if any time two managers or two clients or various people start fighting with each other, they have to go fight with each other, or at least go fight with each other through the board so it's visible to everybody else. They don't go whisper in people's ears. So if I tell people to do work, I'm an owner of the company, they'll tell me basically in a pleasant and kind way, yeah, whatever. Where's my story card? And what it is a protection for them, so they know what they're always supposed to be working on. And at the end of the week, when we're like disappointed that you worked on this all week and we wanted you to get this done, whose fault is that? Management team. We didn't put the right cards up. That's incredibly powerful for an employee, right? Is it an HR policy? Maybe not in the classic sense, but I tell you what, you want to lead to employee satisfaction? Nothing helps lead to employee satisfaction like knowing what I'm supposed to be doing and having a chance to succeed. And one of the biggest rewards in our entire environment is the opportunity to go stick a green dot on these cards. Anybody ever do that in kindergarten? You put up little stars, or right? It's funny. We were humans then. Now we're taller. I guess we're not human anymore. I mean, who might be excited about putting stickers up there? I assure you, anybody on our team who doesn't get to put a sticker up there at least once during the week goes home really disappointed. It's really weird. So we expend a lot of money making sure we have plenty of dots so people can put them up on the board, because they get positive vibes about it. Now, as we actually produce for our clients, we've actually grown. When we grew, we decided to move out of our facility into a bigger facility where, again, we had one big open room. So we want to be able to see everybody in line of sight. So as the organization grows, we transplant. When we have a bigger team, we now have multiple projects. People here don't have their own desk. They don't have their own computer. They all work at the table of a project. So this is a project. Behind it is another project. Team members are encouraged to learn and diversify their skills by every week we move at least one team member off of your project onto another project, and somebody off of that project onto another project, so everybody gets to rotate. You ever hear cross-training? Okay. The opportunity to grow. Doesn't even matter if you don't have the skills for that project. That might be a Ruby project, and you're on the Java project, you're going to move. Because the reality is, learning a new syntax isn't really that hard when you're sitting with a whole bunch of other peers. This is our secret weapon. Kent Beck describes it in a lovely book. And near as I can tell, very few organizations ever do it because that'd be really hard. I'm okay with that. It means I have a strategic advantage over most of you. We pair program. We not only pair program, we pair program all the time. We pair QA all the time. We pair designers all the time. We're learning how to pair our project managers now. This has been an evolution over the course of 8 years. So these are two high-tech anthropologists, those are what we call our designers. They're up at the board. They are cards. They use story cards just like everybody else, because in our organization, if you're not working on a story card, you're not getting paid. The only things you can work on are authorized tasks. If you're not working on authorized tasks and there's nothing to put on your timesheet, you're not getting paid. Oh, good question. Excellent.
So do these people get email from other people in the company?
No, we don't send email to each other. Matter of fact, my favorite story is about 6 months ago. The marketing evangelist sent out a survey to all the employees through email because it was part of some application to some award. So at our daily stand-up meeting, she had to announce, I've sent email to all of the employees. I would hope that you go look for it, because we don't actually look for email. There's no email being sent back and forth. People on the team don't even get email from the clients. Email is sent to the project manager, who is the only person monitoring for email. Imagine in your life, if you didn't have to look at email, how many hours would that give you each week? It's so simple, but doing it is really hard.
Right.
Right? So no, it would never occur to Mita to send email, well, certainly not to her pair partner, but not even to the people at the other end of the desk, and certainly not to the people at the far end of the room. She would just stand up and yell, hey, I need some help. Can you come over here? Now, if she's polite, she might actually get up and she'd walk. Now, most of the chairs have wheels, so we can do this really cool technology thing where you turn around backwards and you push off with your feet and you roll. But that's also why we want a nice flat area with open walls. We paid them to remove walls from our facility. It's weird. It's different. Now, it has a very important purpose. In Agile, your goal is to be able to respond to change. Yes? Anybody disagree? So the customer learns something new about their project, they want to change stuff, right? There's a scope change process in all Agile, and there's some easy way to do it so it doesn't feel like a painful thing, except if you ask certain Agile teams, hey, you know what, next week I'd like to go faster. I'd like to do twice as much work next week as I did last week, or I'd like to do less work. They're answering, no, we got to keep the team stable. Got to keep exactly the same members on the team. Yeah, but the problem is that business changes include more than just changing what you're building. They actually involve changes to the speed at which you need something done. In our organization, one of the decisions a client makes every week, how many people are we working on the project this week? And they make that by choosing the story cards. I think we want to try and get this much done this week. Do you have enough staff to do that? This means people need to be able to move from project to project, which is one of the reasons we practice every single week. If you only do this when you need to, it doesn't work. also have some contractors who also realize, hey, I don't have any work today, but if I came to Menlo to work on my self-study stuff, would that be okay? You bet. And then when somebody else leaves sick or doesn't show up, they're like, hey, I could work. And they get to go sit down right in that seat and say, great, you got your partner, right? We have continuity on the task because there was a pair working on it. So a new person sitting down is not that challenging. But we do struggle sometimes if all the projects all at the same time say, I want to expand. We have a full-time person whose job it is to be recruiting and keeping track of everybody's schedules and so forth. And so they need to understand what the needs are of our contractors in particular. So they build a little spreadsheet. It looks sort of like this. This was some snapshot at the time. And here's Mr. Crompton. Tom Crompton was he was a contractor, then he was an employee, then he was a contractor. You can see there's a little bit of fluidity in our system. And then one day, comes in, does his work, gets up at the end of the day and says, oh yeah, I forgot to mention one thing. Gee, what is that, Tom? I'm going to go walk the Andes. Oh, that sounds cool. When? Tomorrow. Okay, so the practice director from Commerce One goes, well, shit, you're fired. But I thought, well, why do I care? In my world, he's no longer a tower of knowledge. We have this flexible workforce. Okay. All right, Tom. Well, let us know if you come back, and that would be kind of neat. And then we talk to the factory floor manager, this person in charge of making sure there's a available pool of resources, and say, hey, Tom's not coming back for a while. Is there somebody who can work here tomorrow? And she gets on the phone, and she calls, and she checks, and so forth. As she works her list of all the people who are available, what we've found is we've tapped into a secret source of resources that you will never be able to use. There are these folks, really intelligent folks, who've gone off to have families. And then they've decided once they have these families, they like them and they want to keep them. And they don't want to go back to working 70 and 90-hour work weeks. So one example of that is Kimberly here. So Kimberly had a baby, decided the baby came first, but she didn't want to give up working. So she set aside a whole day a week for us. Okay, so we'll keep that in mind and see if we can get you on the schedule. Now we need to find some other people to fill in those other 4 days. Now it turns out that her husband was at the University of Michigan, had the summer off. Was a programmer that we'd used as a contractor before. And oh, by the way, when she's at work, he's watching the baby. Wait a minute. When she's watching the baby, where's he? Well, he's looking for a job. Hey, Archer. So over here, we have Archer's schedule. He works 4 days and then goes home. Now, it doesn't have to be a husband and wife pair, and you'll see that there's holes in the schedule and everything kind of matches up and so forth. So we started doing this, saying, great, you two have a single partner, but you create one little resource, and interestingly, they don't have to talk to each other. They don't even have to overlap, right? Because there's a partner to provide continuity on the task at hand. I don't even know if they talk at home about tasks. Could happen, especially if he refactors her code. But it's interesting, right? So an HR person comes in one day and they're observing this and we're talking about it. They're like, hey, you're doing job sharing. Gee, I guess we are, right? As we found that we had fluidity and flexibility with the resources, and we could offer people, sure, have a sabbatical for however long it takes to come back. Sure, which days of the week would you like to work? Oh, you're going to take Thursday afternoon to go to your kid's event? That's fine. With no regard to the client's project schedule. Because our job is to keep the project staffed and that nobody on the project becomes a tower of knowledge, both trapping the project and themselves. This creates all sorts of freedom. Freedom to go work on different projects, learn different skills, freedom to go off and do things with your family, freedom to go, who knows what in the world he was doing in the Andes with the sheep. Now, we found there was a natural correlation to the next step, which is Tracy went home to have a baby. Tracy didn't want to give up working all day. Her choice. Then, when she wanted to come back, there wasn't room for Maggie in daycare. And there was a meeting with a client where Tracy's influence would be very helpful. So he said, why don't you bring Maggie to the meeting? So Maggie came to a meeting with our client. And then we discovered, hey, there'd be some work, and we had some holes in the schedule, and Tracy was interested in coming in, but couldn't get a babysitter, and we said, well, the meeting worked. Why don't you try coming in for an afternoon with Maggie and work on the project? Now remember, we pair, so it's not like you always need 2 hands to be on the keyboard. We were worried about a few things, there's some liability here, but we checked. After careful study, we found out most of them don't actually have fangs. Those that do, they're very small. Their claws are sharp but very tiny, and they don't move very fast. Now the alternative is perhaps that maybe something would happen to the infant. But I've also found that most mothers are biologically wired. The baby is the #1 concern. And people go, well, wait a minute. Aren't you worried if you're at work that the mother will be distracted by the baby? I'm like, if your baby was at home or at daycare, do you think the mother still wouldn't be distracted? Right? It's still going through their head. Imagine in a world where Tracy can just look over and say, look, Maggie's still asleep. Great, let's keep working. Now, mom sets the rules. We don't have a daycare. She can wear the baby in a little sack. She can put the baby on the bassinet. She can sometimes, as you can imagine, our friend here, he's not the mother. There are lots of volunteers, even amongst really shy programmers. Could I hold the baby? Mom gets to set the rules, right? She decides who gets to hold the baby and not. And you'd be astounded how many engineers don't actually have friends where they, Now, it's kind of fun because when there's a baby in residence, the team behaves better. Now, we didn't strategically plan this benefit, right? Now, even imagine further. The client comes into a meeting. Baby on the team. Clients behave better. Isn't it cool? Some have even accused me. Oh, we were going to have a fight today. I'm like, we're still going to have the fight. Oh, this is to keep me civil. Hey, if it works, I'm willing to take it. Right? But you'll see, babies wander around and so forth, and here we have a corner of our office. It's a big open office. There's no little offices, right? So there's actually a couple that can be set up so mothers can go nurse in the corner, and there's a diaper changing station and so forth. Turns out, our friends at Google, remember the people that we borrowed the ideas for the dogs? Google, because they just moved into Ann Arbor a couple of years ago, they've got a room for mothers to nurse. I thought, cool, that's great. We'll make sure we have a space. And I love this part. Google's got really smart people, right? Apparently most of them are male. They're a little confused about this. They have room for nursing, but you're not allowed to bring your baby to work. Now I know there are technological solutions for this, but it seems to me that if you were going to set up a private space for nursing the baby would be the most important thing to bring along.
You'd think.
Not so allowed at Google. You can bring your dog and you can nurse, but you can't actually nurse a baby at Google. Menlo's cool. You can bring your baby and nurse them. We've actually won an award for that. Now, how do we get these people into our organization who behave well? We do extreme interviewing. We bring in 50 people at a time, and the first and most important criteria is, do you play well with others? So that's what we do the interview about. We could just ask you, do you play well with others? And the answer is?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so it's a lousy question. So instead what we're going to do is pair you with another job candidate, make you do a task for 30 minutes. And the job candidate's job is to make the other candidate look as good as possible, and vice versa. The observer, the facilitator, is a member of our team. They answer questions for the interviewees, sorry. They don't ask them questions. Then you get to do a second exercise with a second person and a third exercise with a third person. And at the end of the night, we're simply going to ask all of our observers who showed the best teamwork. First, #1 criteria for getting into Menlo. We don't look at your resume. We don't ask you a technical question. How many times have you interviewed somebody and said, they're brilliant, maybe they have some fuzzy team skills, but we can work with them on that? Does that ever work out? We figure if we get people with really good team skills who seem technically competent, we can raise their ability up with our organization. So we interview first and foremost, can you play as a team member? Now, if you take pair programming, collective ownership, open collaborative space, and the things I've talked about, you get effective mentoring. You get strong skills development, right? We create job sharing, part-time resources, leaves of absence. This is all an outcome of being agile, not because we thought this would be a cool jobs program to build, right? It's a side effect. We also recognize after we hire people, they'd like to know how they're doing. We were lousy at this. Then we suddenly realized, rather than have managers review people, why don't we have other people who you actually work with on the team give you feedback? By the way, that's trademark, feedback, right? All capital. Because we provide lunch. So we buy the food, we assemble a team of your peers, you get to decide half of the people who show up, the factory floor manager talks with some of the other folks in the factory, and we decide the other half of the people who show up, and we talk about your performance. There may or may not be a manager. The team of your peers is going to make a recommendation as to whether you should move up in the pay scale. There are 15 pay scales. Everybody knows what the 15 pay scales are. They all get paid the same at each level. So if Rob recommends that Amber be promoted, he knows what's going on. And so everybody hopefully is making a decision. Is this a person who's helping make our team stronger so that I can continue to be employed here because we do good work for our clients? Right?
How often do you do this?
This is at the election of the individual. They schedule their own ones. You could have it as often as you like or as seldom as you want.
So if you wanted feedback once a month, you could
Yes.
get it?
Yes?
Okay.
Now, nobody's pushed us that far because then we might not want to buy lunch and there might be others, but yes,
Right.
what we do encourage is that people get feedback more often from individuals or speak, but this is our formal system.
Oh, okay.
So we expect informal feedback on a more frequent basis, and this is usually the good healthy reminder because then you tell your partner, who was your partner 4 weeks back, about this bad thing they did, and they're like, I didn't know. Great, now let's talk about how we should give more immediate feedback in the future. So even the people giving feedback ultimately are typically being reminded of their own bad behaviors that contribute to how do we get team success. So why do we do Agile? We don't do Agile because it's cool. When people come to me and say, hey, how do I adopt Agile? My question is why? What problem are you trying to solve? You should be trying to solve a problem. You should be trying to achieve something. If you're doing Agile just to do Agile, wrong answer. All the things you see here, we do because it provides specific, clear benefits to our clients. They can go faster, they can go slower. Right? They can change scope. They engage with us once every week. That's creating the value that we sell. So we do Agile practices, including pair programming, which seems to be the weirdest thing when we go talk to the majority of Fortune 500s, because it gives us clear strategic advantage in the marketplace. Okay, here's what I want you to think about. Mental exercise, but you could scribble these down. List the top 3 improvements that your CEO would like to see from your IT team. If you don't start here, it doesn't matter. Right? Does anybody in here feel whipsawed about their CEO changing strategy every 2 months? It's because they keep pushing the buttons and nothing happens, so they push some more buttons. If you wonder why they keep pushing buttons, maybe you ought to ask. What is it you're trying to solve? What are the top 3 problems on your list that we should solve in the IT world? Because probably that list isn't changing. They're just changing the response to see if anything happens. Push more buttons. That didn't work. Push some more. Once you actually can identify what the top 3 concerns of your organizational leader, identify potentially 3 Agile practices. I'm assuming you're here because you're interested in Agile. You could find other practices, but identify 3 Agile practices that would most improve the situation on those 3 problems. Okay? Then, identify how those 3 Agile practices might actually affect your HR practices, right? The fact that we can grow and shrink baffles most organizations because, oh, when we hire contractors, it's for a 6-month term, even if we don't need them. Great, so your HR just created another strategic advantage for me. Thank you. I love it. Then, if you did those same 3 practices, what are the benefits that the team members would actually get out of it? Because remember, you're going to ask them to give something up if you go to Agile. They're not going to have their big cube. They're not going to have their piece of code. So you have to identify the things that they're going to get. And this is best done on an individual by individual basis. So when Nationwide Insurance came and toured our facility with 7,500 programmers. They didn't bring them all. They just brought some leadership. We told them, if you want to go agile and you want to actually find out what's going to make things work with the people who you're going to change, you actually have to know what's going to affect all 7,500 because it's different for different individuals. I want to learn new skills. I want a faster computer. I want, right? You want to lure them into the change? You better know what motivates them. Okay. I'm hoping I inspired some questions.
So you talked a lot about how you move them around before the tower knowledge, but how does that affect depth of knowledge? Do you ever find any issues with, since nobody's spending very long doing one thing, they don't actually get time to become an expert on that one?
So how does it affect if people are moving around the depth of knowledge? It does affect it. We pay a cost. Now here's the flip side, right? Having been a practice director with 100 so odd people at Commerce One, the biggest messes I had to undo were the programmer who had the expertise to know what to do and ignore the business because they had done it before. And what they knew was no longer true. And it was no longer true actually on the prior system they built, but they'd won that battle through technical veto, right? And so oddly enough, I think organizations often abdicate to very knowledgeable tech workers who are no longer playing in the business. Now, if they were sitting right next to the business team when they're having problems, I might buy in more. But so many of them are disconnected, and often the conversation when you have it up close and personal, the business should be behaving this way, so I'll code it this way to make them do it. So, I believe there's some expertise you can get. Our team is not confused about being experts, so they don't make assumptions. Well, I mean, all teams make assumptions. They make fewer assumptions. They always ask somebody else on the team who's supposed to be gathering that knowledge, how's this supposed to work? And we think that that ultimately leads to fewer, less expensive mistakes discovered earlier, rather than an expert working on it for 6 months and it comes out and goes, ooh, that's not what we wanted. And then they fight about it. Yes?
How many hours a day do people typically work?
40.
They work 40 hours a week?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah, not a day.
Give me a break.
So
40 hours a week. So if we need more done, what do we do?
More people.
Add more people.
Right.
Because we've cracked that nut. We've solved that problem. Is it perfectly efficient? No. But here's the problem. Working people at 70 hours a week, that pays off for what? A half week?
Right.
And then they start walking like zombies, they start reading their email, they take more coffee breaks. You don't actually get more done. The construction industry has measured this. It doesn't actually work. It just feels good. You can justify to your boss now that things are going better. I don't get benefit from that. Our organization is kind of weird. We're a services firm, so you think, oh, more hours is better. Actually, with 50% of our clients, we defer half of what we would bill in lieu of getting an equity position or a royalty on the product. I want to do the fewest hours on each project and earn a high royalty on everything. Working people 70 hours a week doesn't get me closer to that. So we do 40-hour weeks. Now, when somebody does work with us and they come in for a first day of work, after 8 hours, guess what? They're exhausted. They didn't spend any time reading their email. They went and got coffee once or twice because that's when they're in partner and they decided to go do it, right? They actually work 8 hours. It's exhausting. Try it someday. Well, I mean, so recommend it to some of your peers who don't do it. I'm sure all of you do. Right? Back here.
Yeah, you mentioned one advantage of doing Agile is allow client to change scope.
Yes.
And I want to ask you, do you do fixed price contract or time and material? When you change scope, do you charge them more? Or
So do we do fixed price versus time and materials? Almost all of our contracts now are time and materials.
okay.
To a fixed budget, because there's no more money. When we used to do fixed price deals, and we did a couple, and I used to do them prior to Menlo, the problem is most business participants no longer feel they have skin in the game. Oh, it's your problem. I gave you the spec, your problem. When they walk away like that, I can't solve anything at the weekly planning session. They need to have skin in the game. If they're worried about me having skin in the game, that's easy. I've solved that. I'll take half of what I was going to bill you and I'll put that on a royalty on the product. Product never ships, I'm in the hole. So I get skin in the game a different way than a fixed price contract, because a fixed price contract doesn't bring the parties together.
So do you use Agile
Yes. When we did fixed price contracts, we still did Agile, exactly the same way. The only difference is the project manager was responsible for the contract and they played the planning game, not the client. The client could still show up and request changes, but they didn't have the power anymore to move cards by themselves. They gave that up with a fixed price contract.
Can you talk a little bit about your process?
So the first interview, right, is we bring everybody in mass and you partner with 3 other people. Then we're going to force rank all of you as to who was the best player in, who showed the best teamwork skills. We'll do a second interview where we bring you back. Now, we recognize that some people do good resume, some people do good interview, some people do good work. And there is no correlation whatsoever that I can find between the 3. So we kind of ignore the first 2. And the second interview is you get a 1-day contract to work on a real project with a real team. Because the biggest problem, I think, for most organizations is the people they interview who don't interview well, who would be fabulous workers. And so they actually get to sit in our team and start working, and they shine. And then afterwards you can tell they're so introverted or they're uncomfortable and nervous. But man, you get them in front of the keyboard with a partner in a language they don't even know, and they get things done and they get excited and they engage. It's powerful. In our organization, then we do a third interview, which is a 3-week subcontracting agreement. We're basically saying, hey, we're bringing you on, but understand, there's a point where you're going to be evaluated. Now, the reality is you're evaluated like everybody else every single week because our clients can cut us off, right? Our team always shrinks and grows, so we're always letting people go.
James, do you pay the interviewing for the 1-day contract?
Yes, otherwise it would not be a binding contract by US law. There are other ways to create compensation. Consideration is actually the term of art. But yes, they get paid $8 an hour, and we bill the client for it. So that the client knows when people are on their project, but the clients know about the process. This means, because they actually do work. So we interviewed, imagine this. Imagine you want to be a project manager. Might be a scary idea, but you come to our process, you interview, the second interview you show up and we're like, oh, good news, it's show and tell day, the client's coming. And this client is our biggest client, and they're bringing their CEO, and you're running the show and tell. Oh, and by the way, the current project manager will pair with you, but they're going to put you front and center, you're going to run it. Now this means the CEO is also going to give us feedback on you. Right? How's that for weird? But we get real data. I know how you perform, under real stress. This is my first day on the job, I have to tell you we didn't get the story done.
And I can't tell you why.
And I have no idea, right? Now, at the same time, the team's right there as part of the, and they feel that the team's going to support them, right? And it gives them a better feel of what does it work like, what's life like at Menlo, which is another important part of interviewing. How many times do you interview people and they really don't get a sense of what it's like to be in your culture? Do you think if somebody goes through our first 2 interviews, they have a good idea, some semblance of an idea of what life would be like in our organization? That's important, because that means they have the chance to self-select out if this isn't going to work. It's not going to make them happy.
What do you see in this transition? What has been your biggest failure, and what do you see as your biggest sort of shortcoming right now that you're working?
Well, literally, it would be the call I got at 1:45 saying, hey, James, town without actually doing this client proposal that was due today, and they showed up for it. But that might be my own personal failure. And it actually does point back, right? So there was a heroic failure there. So I've talked about how our developers do planning, but we've extended it to our designers and our QA and so forth. We don't do pre-sales proposals in our planning process, right? We haven't built up sufficient organizational knowledge. I left the office and they're calling me about this. That's a failure. Right? Because the organization has to live without me as well, because someday I want to go walk through the Andes. Well, not actually want to just go golfing, but right? I don't want to be trapped. And so the biggest challenge is to make sure that I don't become the glue that holds it together, or that Rich doesn't become the glue that holds it together. So we have to continue to build that kind of same capability throughout the whole organization, right? We don't think of Agile as a developer practice. And yes, we have failures along the way. Absolutely, it's not utopia. I assure you that my favorite part about going to a conference is everybody, That's fabulous. I go, oh, cool, yeah, sometimes I forget, because it's really hard to work there, right? A key concept that I want to make sure I do put out there. Agile solves nothing. If you don't understand that, you're in real trouble. Agile does not solve anything. It simply creates an opportunity for the culture of transparency to exist. And so only do Agile if you're interested in seeing the underbelly of all your problems, and there's somebody with the fortitude to actually deal with them. Because Agile doesn't solve them. It just makes them apparent. Which is really cool if you're trying to solve it. That's what your CEO is doing there, trying to push all those buttons about. I think I want to try and solve something. Right? And they have no idea. They spin the corporate steering wheel to the right and the car goes left. Oh, I get it, it goes the opposite. And they spin to the left and the car goes backwards. And they just keep throwing more switches. Right? Agile helps make it more transparent. It doesn't solve things.
So you talked a lot about how your company can contract and grow, and now that sounds good for you and your clients, but it doesn't necessarily sound very stable for your employees.
Nope. It is a challenge for the it's a challenge for our contractors and employees. Now, one of the typical things people will ask me is, well, if this is working out so well for people, what's your turnover? Because turnover is a great measure of whether or not you're successful, right? Now, we thought about this long and hard. What we actually think of is we're happy when somebody leaves our organization, and we're sad at the same time, but they go get a 50% raise somewhere else, because I'm not going to give them that. I have to give it to everybody. They all know everybody's salary, right? So if they go leave to go make 50% more because somebody's like, oh, we can hire away a minimum person, that's a good thing. We celebrate it. And then we try and draw more people in, right? So we're going to keep a feeder system. But imagine if you had an innovative company, right? Let's pick this table right here. Fabulous team, they've built up this great stuff, they're producing. Now this team stays exactly the same for the next 20 years. How innovative are they going to be 20 years from now when they have exactly the same team dynamic that they have probably established in a year? Right? How is turnover a good measure of whether or not your team's performing? How do I measure it? The number of people who've left the organization who still come to the all-hands company meeting. The people who don't make it through the interview process, who go get a job somewhere else, and then immediately try to hire us. Right? I have to measure it through other ways because just people wanting to stay at the organization is not a good measure. Or at least that's our perspective today. And it's hard. It's hard to shrink. I'll bet GM, well, there's probably nobody at GM. But imagine if they hadn't paid people not to build cars for 20 years. They might still be in business. Right? I have no choice. When I don't have work, I got to let them go. Otherwise, I'm going to be unemployed, they're going to be unemployed, we're all in trouble. And we choose the people who rose their hand and said, hey, I'll sign on as a contractor.
So do you see, is your workforce then relatively young?
Yes, in a way. So we'll go back to our pair picture. Where's our pair picture? There we go. Yes, John would be flattered. That's what David and Dan and, I mean, understand, there is a prejudice in our organization to be the second wage earner. Or to be less concerned about things if you're a contractor. However, in today's economy where there are so many people who can't find a permanent position, who also get a taste of what it's like to work in this environment where they can put green stickies and work with people who are not exactly like them, right? We value diversity. We use international interns from IESTA to ensure that we have new blood every year who's diverse and that we have to learn how to communicate with somebody from a different culture, different language. Because we think it helps us solve problems. Right? So amazing the number of people walk through and go, oh, this works because it's everybody's in their 20s. And I just look at them and I look at my team and I go, huh? It's like, oh, well, I guess it's good living here. So we're not that way.
Say you're like 50-50 on employees versus contractors.
Probably closer 33 to 66, right? 1/3, 2/3.
Employees?
Yep.
Yeah. So
No.
is that
So
other way?
we're not at 99 yet. So we probably have 15 to 20 employees. I don't actually keep track because it's interesting. I don't actually really need to know. Operationally, they're treated the same. Their compensation and the mechanisms for sending them home and stuff are different.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is that a fairly static number as far as, does that contract as well, or are you mostly cutting back?
It does contract. It was probably one of the biggest failures. Okay, so there are many failures along the way. One of them was it took us a year to fire somebody who didn't fit anymore. He had been a good worker for 2 years. He was an employee. The third year, it was clearly, fire me, I dare you. Fire me, I dare you. And it took us a while to finally say, okay, we got to do this. Because if you have somebody who's not contributing, does the team know it? And if the management doesn't act on it, how does the rest of the team feel about what management's doing? Right? It was debilitating. So we should have acted faster, and everybody would have been happier. He went to another place and found some job that he really liked. Okay, we're now over. It's time for break. I'm happy to answer more questions, so you can chase me down in the hallway. Right?
Actually, what I told the other presenters is they have until 3:15. So
Okay, so we can answer 8 more minutes of questions. I'm happy to do that before we go in the hallway. Let's see if we can get back in the back corner.
With two people paired up doing a set of tasks, is your productivity of two people, if they were doing them separately, or more than that, like 2.3 or 2.5?
So what's the productivity of doing pairs? You know, it's interesting. We have different answers throughout our organization. The long-term effectiveness, I think, is tremendously different. How many people have in their organization somebody who's really brilliant, who doesn't play nicely with others, and if they ever went away, you'd be in real trouble? Or you need more work than they can possibly do, but nobody else can do it because it'd be less efficient, even though you're missing deadlines, right? In our world, we ignore that and say, look, we're going to make everybody work on everything. It's less efficient. But if you're measuring efficiency as a corporate standard for what you're trying to produce, that's a lousy measurement. Effectiveness, right? It's sort of like, I believe the common statement of 8 to 10 people is a good size for an Agile team. We run teams as big as 30. Do we pay a cost for that? Yeah. But let's explain to the venture capitalists why we're not going to be ready for the trade show. Because we're trying to be efficient. Yeah, but you're not going to reach the goal. Right? How many people drove here today? Use the efficiency gear to get home. It's called N. Right? Put it in N and just kind of coast downhill. Steer more downhill, and eventually, maybe you'll make it home. This is what it feels like to the CEO. The IT team keeps saying, we're not being efficient. We need to do this because we're efficient. You want to be effective. Now, when you have multiple strategies for being effective, measure the efficiency of each or cost of each, and then make decisions based on that. But if you optimize first and foremost for efficiency, you will always trap yourself, right? This is the basic concept of lean. I'm going to sub-optimize each one of these pieces to make them perfectly efficient, and then wonder why the system doesn't perform at all. Right? So it's amazing when people come take tours. And anybody here, you are all invited, if you're ever in Ann Arbor, Michigan, to come by and visit us. Literally just come upstairs, find out where we are, give us a call, just walk in and say, I was at a conference and James said I could come take a tour. And a member of our team will give you a tour. Okay? When people come in and take the tour and see this, they start to recognize maybe individual efficiency is not the best thing for their organization.
At the same time, there are researchers, Alistair Coburn, I believe, have some, and they do show that pair programming is more efficient.
So, like Alistair Coburn, and there were some early studies by the pair programming book from North Carolina. I mean, let's be real. I spend my money on any internal project. We're rebuilding our website. The team pairs when they're doing this. I'm paying my money. Do you think if I thought that it wasn't valuable, I would pay 2 people to do the same job as one? The problem is if one person does it and it gets moved off to another project, I'll never get the project done. I need team-based knowledge. Team-based knowledge cannot be trapped in an individual. More questions? Oh, that shut up.
How many roles, different roles do you have on a project team?
Okay, so we have developers,
Yeah.
we have quality assurance, we have high-tech anthropologists, which is our designers, and we have project managers who are PMI certified or working on it. I happen to be a PMP. It's kind of fun. I give these presentations at PMI conferences. All this stuff is what PMI teaches. It's not what people interpret PMI to be. It's what Rational teaches in RUP. Again, it's not what people interpret or what they do. Iterations, right? Don't do all these practices. This is a work authorization board. And when I describe it using PMI language, they're stunned, right? But those are the key roles. We also have a factory floor manager whose job it is to make sure that there's extra people available or people on demand. We have an evangelist whose job it is to make sure that Rich and I and others go out and do public speaking because we don't actually have a sales force. So this is how people sort of learn about us. I'm actually training you all to be marketing experts in Menlo. So you're going to go tell all of your friends, I met the weirdest company today. And one of you will find somebody who maybe wants to do a project with us. Does that answer your question?
I think so, and also one other thing, you said you hire based on people being great team players, but then how do you decide their starting salaries? Is it still based on their technical skills and how senior they are?
So we do struggle with how we set starting salaries. We vacillated between two models. One where we try to evaluate where they are and one where everybody starts as an intern. But imagine if you start as an intern at Menlo after being in the industry for 20 years, you get to ask for feedback and a review as often as you want. There's no minimum amount of time you have to spend in a pay grade to move up again. Don't care, not interested. We also have one big push right now. We now have the movement within the team to start asking for demotions because there's a couple of team members who are not performing and they want to be moved down. Not the others want to move them down, the individuals who are not performing because they recognize this is a unique culture and they don't want the ills that they've seen in other organizations to start here because somebody once made it to this level and they're not performing there. So I'm getting heavy push to start lowering salaries.
Wait a sec, is ADP doing your salary?
We do. Yes, ADP cuts our payroll checks.
Is
this a work in progress, or are you done?
No, it's got to be a work in progress. I assure you, there is nothing that I consider us to underperform. The classic statement is.
What are you looking at next to change this?
Well, I personally am focused on the pre-sales process, having been the person who left town without the pre-sales thing in the folder. The team is actually starting to do a lot more cross-functional pairing. So an HTA and a programmer go off to do observations together. Right? We are continuing to improve in the quality assurance realm. Two interesting things is to make sure they're not testers. So that means, A, they need to continue to find automated tools for doing high-level strategic testing, as well as being involved in the early business analysis. So they go out and do observations and they help the high-tech anthropologist because quality assurance starts when you gather requirements, not by looking at the requirements and saying, oh, right? So they're trying to figure out fit for purpose as opposed to fit for spec. But yes, we're full of challenges. I also come to these because then I also get to learn. Steal good ideas, that's what we do.
If the feedback process is where individuals get raises effectively, they're moving in their pay grades?
They get recommendations for raises, yes.
Okay, recommendations. So I was wondering about the team just sort of self-selecting everybody's going to like gas companies.
It's an interesting question. So let's imagine, right, because the team could conspire against us. They could all decide they all want a review and they all vote for everybody to get a raise. Well, the interesting thing is that when we actually staff projects, we actually do look at the financial model to make sure that we're actually going to come out profitable. And if I have the most senior people, I mean, I think our tops pay rate is somewhere, I don't know, $160,000 a year or something. Most people are nowhere near that, right? There are people down at the $8 an hour range, right, across those 15. If I had everybody at $160,000 a year, and I'm charging clients $85 an hour, I'm going to lose money. We can't do that. That means we'll use less of the senior talent and go find other people. They know the model, it's all open, right? I mean, it's not hidden, it's not being... There's no office for the CEO. There's no office for me. We sit out with everybody else. The conversation for feedback is held in the room with everybody else. When somebody gets fired, it's held in the room with everybody else. It fits our culture. It's what we do. Nobody's surprised by it. We also don't make it a big deal.
What are the mores on personal phone calls and stuff like that?
When you get a personal phone call from the outside, so it simply depends upon the importance. So if you come into work and say, my sister-in-law is supposed to have a baby, I'd like to leave my email up or I'd like to actually have my phone out, your partner's going to adjust to that. Now, if your partner is constantly going away, then we have the talk with your partner and you have the talk with them that if you're off having personal phone calls, you can't get paid and your partner can't get paid because they can't work. And we quickly sort that out. But do people take personal calls? Yes. Do they often have to train others to understand, I can't just do that. There's 80 people watching me while we have this call. I'm hoping it's important, honey. Right? We had one lady join us as a new hire out of college. She found out 2 weeks later her friends were all very upset with her. They're like, but you don't take our phone calls, you don't do our instant text messages, you ignore our emails all day long. And Keely's like, but I'm working. And they're like, so are we.
Maybe.
All right, if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to talk to you in the hallway. Thank you for coming, and I hope you found this valuable.